Hi, I'm Caroline McLaughlin. Get inspired with the Love Inspired series with Jacques, presented by Bookin' Around Town on the Audio Flow.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Love Inspired series presented by Bookin' Around Town. I'm your host Jacques and so excited to be here with you guys as we are on episode 3 of Love Inspired. And I think that this particular series starting in November, right around Thanksgiving and running through Christmas is perfect to keep you all inspired and motivated and encouraged and entertained around things of love and hope. And so today we have a special guest with us. I am super excited to chat with her. We are going to speak about her upcoming book. It should be releasing soon, hopefully, if it hasn't released by the time this episode airs. But I am excited for you guys to meet Deborah Malone. Good morning, Deborah. Welcome to the Love Inspired series. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, good. And what I love most about this series is that I get to speak with women from all different types of walks of life and who've experienced so many different things and really getting to chat with persons who have written books that kind of fall in line with more of self-help, not really, nonfiction or anything like that, but something that really speaks to people on their particular journeys. And so I'm looking at information on your book, Blooming in Broken Places, and just reading a little bit information about the reason behind the story. But for persons who aren't familiar with your work and you're new to them, I would love to have you kind of tell us, first off, how you got inspired or what inspired you to begin writing, if that was something that you experienced, in your life or earlier in your life, it was something you wanted to do and it just happened. So kind of walk us through how you got to this particular journey.
Well, that's an interesting question because I talk about that a lot at conferences, and I almost have to go back to the beginning when, I think I was born holding a book. I've always loved to read. I can't remember a time that I didn't enjoy reading. And I think that morphed into my love for writing. And probably, let's see, on my journey, I was in my 40s when I went back to college and I took a creative writing class. And when I did, that just sparked a fire in me to start writing, and I did. And I wrote mostly for pleasure at that time. Mm-hmm. And later on, a friend of mine and I had gone to a restaurant, and it had a lot of history behind it, and we both enjoyed a magazine. It was Georgia Backroads, which is a historical magazine. And I said, somebody should write an article for Georgia Backroads about this restaurant. And he said, well, why don't you? And I said, well, okay, I will. And actually, that was my first piece that I submitted, and it was accepted. But people will soon learn that writing is like riding a roller coaster.
Oh, yes.
And so I went back to talk to the lady that owned the restaurant, and her husband was there. And I said, well, I need to talk to Miss So-and-so because, I have some more questions and I want to take some more pictures. And he looked at me and he said, well, I'm sorry. She ran off with the cook over the weekend. And
oh my gosh.
I thought, well, he's joking, And then I saw these big alligator tears rolling down his eyes. And sure enough, she had really run off with the cook over the weekend. And I sat there, for it seemed like a couple hours listening to his story. And then I thought, well, maybe no wonder she ran off with the cook. But anyway, needless to say, it didn't get published, but I went on to write another article for them, and I've been writing for them for 10 years. So that's basically how I got into the writing game.
That's a really interesting story. I don't think I've heard anything as detailed or funny as that. But so you got kind of your start just kind of talking a little bit about things in Georgia. So I'm assuming that you're originally from Georgia. I can kind of hear a little accent there.
You can kind of hear a little accent.
Well, I didn't want to say, well, I can hear your accent. It's really strong.
That's okay. I know. I have to tell you this little story about my accent. I went to Cincinnati a couple summers ago, and I was at a hotel, and I went downstairs, and where you ordered your breakfast, it is, it was out in the open, and you just kind of went down a line, and you told them what you wanted, and they fixed it. Well, there were a bunch of people behind me, and I told the guy, I said, could I have some eggs and bacon? And he says, I'm sorry, what did you say? And I said, could I have some eggs and bacon? And he says, I just wanted to hear you say that again. So, needless to say, I know my accent is very thick. But yes, I am from Georgia. I've always lived in Georgia.
I like it. I like your accent a lot. And I don't find that I meet a lot of, would the correct term be Georgians? I just kind of made
Georgians.
That up.
Yeah, Georgians.
Yeah. See how I pronounced every letter? That comes from me not being from the South, but the Midwest. So, we all have our interesting accents and things like that. But I love it. I love your accent. So I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to talk to you, and hopefully you'll do all the talking so I can sit here and enjoy listening to your voice.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so that was the initial start that you got in writing. And I want to know a little bit about your journey and how you got to moving toward writing the book, Blooming in Broken Places, and just kind of, what's the backstory on how you got into writing what we consider self-help or motivational books?
Okay. When I first started writing my novels, I had been writing for Georgia Backroads for 2 or 3 years, and found out that I loved history. Mm-hmm. So I started writing my first novel, which are cozy mysteries. All my novels so far were cozy mysteries, which mm-hmm. means they're light and they're funny. Mm-hmm. And I made the settings real. So if you were familiar with that area, then you would be familiar with the roads and the restaurants and the stores. And people like that. I found out I didn't do it for a marketing purpose, but I realized after my first book or so that they really enjoyed that. So I purposely picked places that I knew people were tourist spots that people would go to. So I've got 6 books out. I've got 6 cozy mysteries, and all the settings are real in those mysteries. There are 2 series. There's 4 in one series, and there's 2 in the second series. And the interesting thing is I was writing the 3rd book in the second series, and I was led to write Blooming in Broken Places. And my life, I would say, has been challenging. And people had asked me over the years, why didn't I write about it? And I just wasn't at the place to write it. I didn't want to be negative, and I didn't feel like bringing all those old feelings up at the time. And so I just, I thought, well, I'm never going to do this. But I was asked to speak last year, and when I spoke on some of the things in my life, and I said, well, I've never really talked about these in public, and this will probably be the last time I do that. Well, after I finished the speech, I got a standing ovation, and people came up to me and said, why would you say that? You need to write your story. People need to hear this. This is so encouraging. And so, like I said, when I was writing the 3rd book, I was led to write Blooming in Broken Places. And it is about my life, but what I did was I wove it with women Bible that God used, because he used broken women for his
Mm-hmm.
purposes. And so that way it's got a positive spin on it. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am with that book.
I love it. And so, did you find that, during your doing the research with being able to select those women from the Bible, that it also kind of continued to assist you with, the healing or whatever it is that you were going through, and getting a deeper knowledge and understanding about why God used those particular women? I like to know that process because, people do research for all types of books. And being that this one really deals with, of course, women and being broken, and people that are mentioned, in the Bible, do you feel like that kind of pushed you to really heal and move forward in your life?
Absolutely. It was such a blessing. It was such a blessing to study these women. And one of the books I use that I would recommend is called All About Women in the Bible, and it's by Edith Dean. And in his old book, it was written back in the 1950s, but it is just fantastic. But I used several books, but that was my favorite. And, we hear about these women, but sometimes we don't know the whole story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
We just hear bits and pieces of the story until you really get into it and start studying it. And I think of, for example, Miriam. She was Moses' sister, and
Mm-hmm.
we know that, and we know that she hid Moses. But that wasn't all. Grew up into adulthood. She was a integral part of the people in the wilderness. She was a leader of the women,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a singer, and she was a prophetess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there were other dimensions to her that I had not even heard about or studied about. And so it was very healing to see how God used these women, and very encouraging. And that's what I want it to be for other women. I want it to be encouraging for them that, even when we're in our darkest places, God can and will use us.
Yes. And I think that's such a strong statement, because so many people, Christians, and those who haven't accepted Christ, we always can get stuck in a place that, I've done this in my life, I've done, this amount of wrong, or maybe even entered into a backslidden state that they feel like, God can't use them, or they can't be restored, and it's just no hope. And so, and it seems as though your particular book will restore hope to people who feel like they can't get back there, or there is no hope for them. And that it really doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter where you are, particularly in your life, that God still can use you. And I think that's very important for people to understand.
Yes, and I think one of my favorite stories that came out, well, I'm going to say my favorite. Then I'm thinking of another one that's my favorite too. So I
I
don't know.
have that problem too. Don't worry. You can have more than one favorite. It's okay.
I was thinking of the woman at the well, the Samaritan
Yes.
woman at the well, and that is such a beautiful story. She came to the well in the hottest part of the day, and
Mm-hmm.
probably so she wouldn't have to be around other women, or the gossip, or to hear
Mm-hmm.
them, or she was embarrassed, or she felt bad about herself. So she
Mm-hmm.
went when there was nobody there. And Jesus actually went out of his way to go where she was at the well. Normally you wouldn't take the route to where he was going.
Mm-hmm.
And but when her and Jesus talked, and she got so excited, and she found out he was the Messiah, she dropped her container and she went and told the people, and this is a woman that didn't want to be around people, and now she's going to tell the people about Jesus. And he used her when she was at her lowest place to teach all these people. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite stories too. I mean, actually, one of my favorite characters because it's very relatable and it doesn't even have to deal with somebody who was caught in adultery. Well, not caught, but somebody who kind of was on that end of things that they did.
Right, right.
It can be used in so many different forms of being in a relationship with things that aren't yours or I'm trying to put this into words where it's not so much of, yes, we know that the story with the woman at the well was, she had these different men that weren't hers and she was, with them. But also, like you mentioned, she was trying to go at a time where nobody was there so she could escape this scandal and the gossip. But she ends up speaking with the person who actually saved her
Right.
and I love that whole idea that sometimes when we try to run and escape things, we run right into the thing or the person that we need that's going to help us come out of what we're in. And so, yeah, it's deep. I could probably preach a sermon about that right now, but this is not what Love Inspired is about. So your particular book, when you wrote it and you decided, you were writing the cozy mysteries. Now, are you still writing those as well, or are you writing across different genres and different
Okay,
forms
this
of?
was my first nonfiction book, which
Okay.
was an experience in itself. And I always have stories to tell, but I have a little story. Um, I did not have the confidence to write the book by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I belong to several writers groups online, and I sent the word out, would anybody like to co-author with me? Well, I got back a lot of responses. But there was one lady that I was drawn to. Her name is Julie Morris,
Mm-hmm.
and she wrote like I wanted to write. And so she lived fairly close to me. She lives in Birmingham, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, well, I can go meet her and we can talk, and this will be good. So she said, yeah, let's do it. So I went up there, and the first thing she said was, but she had been doing this for years, writing a lot longer than I have. And she says, well, now, Debbie, she says, I really don't want to write any, but she said, I would love to mentor you. Well, my heart just sank because I'm thinking, this is going to be an easy out if I can get somebody else to help me write this. And she said, but this is your story. You need to write it. She
Yeah.
said, it's your baby. And she was right. She was right. I did need to write it. And she was right there beside me through the whole process. And I'm glad that I did it. But it was new for me. It was a new experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's, a lot of people, when they are new to, um, when they've just figured out that they have gone through a journey, a lot of people want to write about it, but aren't as comfortable yet with writing about it. And I'm glad that people continue to push you and tell you to write the story because nobody else can tell that story like you can. It is a written testimony, and nobody can be your testimony. So, Deborah, how exciting it is that your book will be releasing this month, right in line with the Love Inspired series. So, that's got to be fun.
Yes, I am so excited. I've been working on the marketing. So I haven't really been writing on my other books yet, though eventually I probably will go back and finish. I want to finish up that series that I was working on,
Mm-hmm.
but I've intentionally have been working the last few months on the marketing for the book coming out. And so I was very excited.
And do you think that this particular book, Blooming in Broken Places, is going to have you look at writing a little bit differently when you go back to the other series, or do you think your writing and style will stay the same?
It will probably much stay the same for the cozy mysteries.
Okay.
Probably will, but that doesn't mean now that I've written one nonfiction book, who knows where this will lead. And I'm hoping also that it will help me have a platform for speaking. I have spoken some. I teach a lot. I mean, I teach all over the country at writers' conferences, but I would like to start speaking and doing some keynote speeches and going to churches and speaking to ladies. So I'm hoping this is going to open a whole new world for me.
Yeah, I think so. And I also see that you have been on the radio, Never Ever Give Up Hope Radio with Carol Graham. So what's your experience like being on an actual radio show and sharing with listeners about your experiences?
I loved it. Had a great response from it, and it was fantastic. I've also been on, I don't know if you're familiar with Babby Mason,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been on her television show, Babby's House. And so that was really fun. I really enjoyed that.
Well, good, good. I mean, and you never know, at some point you'll have a podcast just like this one, and maybe you'll invite others who have stories of their different journeys that they want to share, or people who've actually read your book can come on. See how I'm pitching out ideas for you for later? I'm giving you more work. Isn't that bad? Like you don't have enough to do.
No, I love it. I love it. I love marketing. I teach marketing. So anything about marketing, I just actually made a trailer for the book a few months ago. And so, that was exciting to be able to make that trailer. And so learning new things, I love. You're never too old to learn.
I agree with that 100%. Although I would prefer to learn things and not have to technically go back to school because I don't like homework. I know, sad excuse, really. But if I can just if I can learn things hands on, that's always fun. So maybe I will have to keep in contact with you, and you can help me with some different marketing things, and I can continue to promote your work on my
I would
show.
love it. I would love
Yes,
it.
it sounds amazing. And so you mentioned that you were going to go back and finish your other project, your other series after this one releases. Do you have any direction about what you would like to see happen next for you in your writing as it relates to this first nonfiction book? Where do you see it going, and has God given you any direction about that, or is he like with
Not
me, he
not
gives me
actually on
nothing?
I'm sorry. Not
I
actually on the writing, but
mhm,
my goal now is to work with this book and
mhm.
market this book and to work on my speaking engagements.
Okay. So, speaking engagements, everybody, if you're listening and you're interested in having Deborah come and speak about this particular book or anything that relates to a journey that you're on, relates to being healed from being broken or being used while you're broken and being put back together, it's kind of like that Humpty Dumpty mentality, I always like to say.
Right.
So weird that that comes to mind, but the only person that can put you back together is Jesus Christ, and so I am looking forward to reading your book and getting some information about that and sharing it with other people. But in the meantime, Deborah, since you are into marketing, I'm pretty sure you have a website or some way that the listeners can get in contact with you if they want to learn more about how they can reach you to come do a speaking engagement. So if you want to let us know how we can find you across social media, that would be great.
Absolutely. My website is www.deborah-malone.com. And that would probably be the easiest way to get in touch with me. And all my titles are on the website, so you can look at those and see what you would like.
All right, so it seems like you have your hands pretty full through the remainder of the year, getting your marketing out for the book. And of course, we will make sure that we are promoting that for you as well. And also, so when you're not writing, I like to always ask this because it seems that writers really don't take breaks, but I'm hoping that you do. So when you're in your off season and when you're not working or marketing and preparing this book, what are some things that you like to do to just relax?
Um, that's an interesting question.
It's always the hardest question, it seems like.
Because it seems like I'm always marketing or writing, but I do enjoy walking. And I will take walks in the woods, and my husband and I'll go, and maybe we'll find a trail and we'll go hiking. And we like day trips, so we'll go on day trips. And so those are some things. And I enjoy reading too. I still enjoy reading. I don't have much time, but when I do, I'll grab a quick read.
Well, that's good because I get from a lot of people, I don't really have time to do this and I don't have time to do that, but I think it's really important, you know, as writers, there's still a certain thing as work-life balance, and you've got to have that time to refocus and recenter. And I like that you go on walks because that's one of the most peaceful and calming things. And you're in Georgia. The weather there seems pretty nice. I mean, I haven't been there in a while, so you'll have to send me some pictures and tell me how those walks are going.
It's gorgeous. We have a college is pretty well known. I think it's the largest in the as far as land wise, the largest in the United States, and it's called Berry College.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will go out there, and it's just I love it. I love to be with nature and see all the beautiful things that God has made. And there's,
Mm-hmm.
there's deer just roaming around. And, every now and then you'll run into a snake or a spider, which isn't too much fun.
Oh gosh,
But,
no.
but it's a beautiful place to be.
Everything sounded good up until the snake part. And then I tuned you out and was like, we should just stop at nature looks good. Every now and then there's a deer. I can even deal with the spider, but then the snake part just kind of throws me off. All right. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for being on the Love Inspired series. I can't wait to read your book and learn more about what you're doing after the book releases, and to follow you. And hopefully one day I'll get to meet you if I'm ever in Georgia. It seems like you're in those smaller towns, but I like small towns. They seem more family oriented. And so I'll have to come and hang out with you, and maybe you can bring me some famous Georgia peaches because I know that's what you guys are famous for.
Yes, and if you're ever in the Atlanta area, I'm not too far from Atlanta.
Oh,
So
good.
I would love to come and meet you. I have a daughter that lives in Atlanta, so I could just kill two birds with one stone.
Yes, we are killing two birds with one stone. Probably next year, I will make a trip out and meet Deborah personally, and take some pictures and let you guys know this is the kind of relationship we like to build on Love Inspired. And everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And remember, you can follow us on Facebook at Booking Around Town, also on Instagram at Booking Around Town, and Twitter at Booking Around TWN. This episode will be available on iHeartRadio and TuneIn, and downloadable on iTunes and Google Play. As always, our episodes are also available on YouTube on our Booking Around Town station. Thanks so much to my producer Danielle at Firefly Productions and my assistant Rebecca for all that she does. And remember, everybody, remember to get inspired. Have a great week. Bye.